We know her as Meemaw, Mary Jo Shively, Emmie Sims, and the voice of Bo Peep. Today, Annie Potts is here to share passionately about another part of her life, helping others and encouraging us to aid folks less fortunate than we. Listeners, if you were hoping we'd discuss Annie's TV work or her career in this interview, I'm sorry to disappoint, but please head to Advanced TV Herstory archives for 2 special episodes entitled Designing Women's Earnest New Year's Eve. You remember that episode. And Designing Women 1, Body Shaming 0. I bet you also remember that one. But if you're here to get inspired, involved, or reflect on how TV has helped raise you, then you're in for a treat. And as you listen to Annie's authentic call to action, you'll be reminded of the joy and examples of courageousness she's brought and brings you and women in your life. Annie is about to challenge us both to up our game. It's my humble honor to bring you Annie Potts and her newest project, The Heart Channels. This is about the project, your charity work, the story that brings us to today, what it means for you as a person, why it's special to you, why you're using your time when you could be doing so many other things.
I am doing so many other things. It's the old adage of, hey, if you want to get something done, ask the busiest person you know. And I would offer myself up as one of those, except the other women who have collected with me to do this, they are also the busiest people in the world. But, looking through your notes, it's like, what was the original impulse for all of this? And first I thought, it was when I met this little boy on the beach on the island of Anguilla who had no speech at 8 years old. And I'll get to that story. But originally, what gave me the idea is it came from my family. I grew up in a little rural town about 50 miles north of Nashville, which wasn't nearly as cool as Nashville is now. And one Sunday, we were driving back out to our home, which was way out in the country, about 9 miles out of town. And we lived on a main road. I don't believe even the interstate I-65 had come through yet. It was rainy. It was like early spring, March or something. Mm-hmm. And there were some people walking on the side of the road in the rain. And they were all wrapped up and had like a blanket over their head. And it looked like the woman was carrying a baby over her shoulder like that. And so it was pretty close to our home. So my dad pulled in the garage, let us out. And he said, I'll be back later. He just turned the car around and went and picked those people up. And he owned a little motel in the town where we grew up, and he installed them in there and helped them get on their feet. And I know he cried over it because he was so moved by it that they, had come to that. And that was like in 1957, 1958, where we didn't have hordes of people living under underpasses and, there wasn't any of that. But he gave me that example of turning the car around and going to help and doing what he could. He found out that the woman wasn't carrying a baby. She was carrying a stuffed animal. But it didn't matter. He said it doesn't matter what she was carrying. That what matters is that they were in need and we could help them. Mm-hmm. So that always stuck with me. Some years ago in this little island where I've been vacationing with the family, it's just nothing but a little sandbar. We'd unplug our children there, just no TVs, not much phone, anything. And there was a little boy on the beach and he came up to me. I was about to get in and swim my laps. And he saw that I had some goggles and he pointed at them. He wanted them, I said, oh, sure. And I gave them to him. Then he grabbed my hand and took me to the ocean with him. He just wanted to play. Mm-hmm. So I played with him for a while, and it didn't take too long to see that he didn't have any language. His mother came in not very long into our little swim, and I said, what's going on with your son? She said, oh, I don't know. I was like, well, you don't know? She said, no, she'd never been able to get him diagnosed there on the island. And I said, oh, my goodness. So I thought, oh, what can I do for this kid? So I looked up online if there was anything on the island that helped special needs kids. And there was one little there was one little place that was offering help for them, and I looked them up. And the woman who had started had a young daughter who had some kind of genetic glitch and was profoundly impacted, and they hadn't had much help. Anguilla is a British protectorate, but there's just not a lot of organized help for special needs there. Anyway, I thought, what could I do to help him? And I thought, well, I could give the mother money, but I don't think that always helps, just to throw money at the problem. So I thought, well, if I could do something that would be like an ongoing little income for them. So I was sitting on the beach, and I had put an app on my iPad for my little nieces and nephews to finger paint with. I sat on that beach, and his face was so emblazoned in my memory. I started doodling him. I couldn't stop. It was a little crazy. I couldn't stop. I thought, oh, well, I could, the images were so stark. His skin is very dark, and the sand is very white, and the sea is turquoise. And so they were very, they were cartoony, but I thought, oh, wow, I think people would buy these and as a greeting card or something, and they could sell them at the resorts, and then they would feel like they had agency in that. Anyway, I did a bunch of little things, and first I made them as cards, and then I had them all spread out, and a girlfriend of mine came in, and she went, oh, you've got a book. So anyway, I made a book, and it sold on the island, and I tried to sell it here too, but, self-publishing, all that stuff. But the book exists, and I have continued to help that boy and his family. His mother after a couple of years, she said, I've just got to get him to England, Annie, so we could get a diagnosis and something. She'd never been off the islands before in her life. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I don't know if I can help you there. And I did have some contacts there who were psychologists and stuff. And they said, Annie, do not let her come. Do everything you can to convince her not to, because we have a wave of immigrants. The government can't support it, and they will not be helped. So I tried to talk her out of it, and she was like, no, I just feel like I have to do this. So we did a GoFundMe and raised some money to get the mom and the older sister and the boy on the plane to England. Let's see, how long have they been there now? I think they've been there about 8 years now. She has made an unmitigated success of that family there. She got him in special needs school. She went back. I mean, I don't know if she'd ever finished lower grades herself, but she's getting her college degree so she can help special needs. The sister is at the top of her class, and she's in biomedical stuff. And he has more language. It's incredible. And the lesson there was that there was a single mother who was really up against it. And all she needed was a little hope and somebody to believe in her, and a little cash in their pocket to share. And she's just been incredible. And I, of course, am still in contact with them. And I wrote her the other day just to say, I'm so proud of you. It's just sensational what you've done. And I said, I worried about you so much. I didn't want you to go. And here you've been so great. And she wrote me back, and she said, thank you for being there for me and believing in me. She said, I didn't always tell you, but times have been hard. And at one point we were homeless. My heart just about stopped. And I said, oh, Karen. I said, why didn't you tell me? Don't ever let that happen again. But how incredible that and it's proof positive that, when people need help and they ask for help, or if help is extended to them, that idea that, well, they're just going to use it on, drugs and cigarettes and alcohol. No. And that woman, even though she knew I would readily give it to her, she did not ask until she had come to a solution on her own. That just totally inspires me. To this day, I wake up and I think about her courage And that it's so easy to help. It really is. Except when you're trying to become a 501. and, and then it gets a little tricky.
Let's just segue over to how this story was the germ of the Heart Channels. And where does the name Heart Channels come from?
Well, since I had this wonderful series that I'm a part of on the air, I've had some extra monies to help other people and to share with others. And I thought, oh boy, I should do that. And then COVID happened, and I took the lead off another organization called Following Francis, who were during COVID were giving stimulus checks, or the equivalent of a stimulus check, to the poorest of the poor. Some who were undocumented, some who were just had lost their home and couldn't pick up their stimulus check because you have to have an address at that time. You needed that. So I had gotten involved somewhat with a school here that I read about, who 40% of the kids were homeless, 80% lived below the poverty line. I had gone in to help them. I took some copies of my book. The principal of that school is an extraordinary man who had just made the most of this school with his, you would think, you go, oh, well, you read those statistics and you're going to go in and your heart's going to break. But not so. He had turned it into a STEAM school, and the kids were thriving and happy, and it is just marvelous to watch. So to carry forward this Following Francis idea, I got in contact with him and I said, some friends of I would like to give some money. And I just told him the story, and he was like, I said, could you help me find some really worthy people who need it? And he was like, oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And by this time, he had been put in a supervisory position for 120 schools.
Wow.
And so, man, he got the counselors on that. And they literally, in 24 hours, they had list of the family description, living in a home, the grandfather's raising them, their 8 kids in one room. I mean, the stories would take you to your knees in a minute. So I think 6 or 7 times we gave as much as we could scratch up. And the counselors did such a beautiful job. They asked people just to come, that they would be given a gift. They weren't told what it was. And that box the cash up in beautiful, beautiful boxes, and said, don't open it till you get home. So they had no idea. But the counselors did get some responses from people, and the gratitude, they were touched. That was such a hard time that we were all in, but other people suffered more. So then, this thing happens when you get involved with this kind of thing, and then you get, it's like what I call hooked on helping, because it feels good. It feels a lot better than getting that giving thing.
The endorphins and the adrenaline and all that good serotonin, I think.
Yeah, that's some good stuff. So I thought, wow, my best friend, she has a knack for people in need finding her, as I find with my own self. She had some projects that she wanted to do. She was helping a young single mother. And anyway, she was like, this woman she's been in an abusive relationship, and she and her daughter are living like in a one-room apartment, and they just sleep on top of their clothes. She said, I think it would help them a lot if we could get them a bed. I mean, some basic stuff, So it just kept rippling out from there. And I thought, as long as I have this show on and have a bit of a platform, then I can kind of direct some other like-minded people who are also hooked on helping or want to get hooked on helping. But we try to do it very personally. It's just like when we gave out the stimulus checks, and you're there eye to eye, hand to hand, and you get that kind of personal thing instead of putting a check in the mail to United Way. And because we've been small and we just kind of look around our neighborhoods and go, ooh, those people need help. They need winter coats. Or so this idea was born out of that stuff.
We think about watching an old black and white movie that depicted the Depression, or we think about the original Waltons, the pilot, which took place at Thanksgiving. And growing up in the suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota, I couldn't fathom that there was that kind of poverty in the United States. And yet it was, 1970, 71 was when I think the Homecoming premiered. So that was 40 years away from the Depression. That really, that's like the 80s today. So we're at that point again, where people who literally in the United States, the land of so much plenty and opportunity, and one bad situation happening to a family and generations are impacted.
Yeah. They're, as they say, one emergency room visit away from losing their home or their apartment.
Living in your car. So the Heart Channels is led by you and a few other friends, it sounds like, who all come from very strong backgrounds of administration and communications. And so you're putting all these pieces together, and it appears from the website. And listeners, the website is theheartchannels.org. Go there today, and there's an opportunity there for you to donate. And I'm going to say this about 3 more times before I let Annie go, because it's important that everybody see the amount of work that's going into this and sort of the organization and the emphasis. And so the website itself talks about your emphases around education, quality of life, and well-being. How did you end up honing in on those versus other sorts of ways to assist people?
Well, the kinds of people that sort of fell into our laps, each one has been different, but worthy, we thought. I mean, we haven't really got into medical stuff. I wish, but can't do. It just seemed like mostly it was single mothers or women or young women. I was working with the LAUSD through their counselors. I had told them, I said, if you have any child in your class or any family that is struggling, who were at the edge, I said, call me on my cell phone. So I got one of those calls, and she said, Annie, there's a young woman here. She is graduating high school. She said she only came to the U.S. 3 years ago. She's academically gifted, and she's gotten a scholarship to college. She said she's gotten her scholarship, but she needs room, board, books, all of that stuff. And I said, we're in, we'll do it. I have a very close relationship with her, and she spends a lot of time at our house. I'm sort of her, I had to go to the emergency room with her a couple of weeks ago. She got food poisoning, and she's a beautiful girl from Guatemala. And the doctor came in the emergency room, and he went, and your relationship to her is, I was like, well, I'm kind of her American mother. They seem to be satisfied with that. But for some, I've become the American mother. That makes me so happy. But anyway, to answer your question about the Heart Channel's name, I thought when I first thought of it and was talking to my girlfriends, I went, I think I know exactly what the thing looks like. And it's just, my face coming out of a little red retro TV, just a play on the word channels, TV, all of that stuff. And the channeling part is just, those pathways that the heart forges to bring you to people who are in need.
Just looking at these priorities of education, quality of life, and well-being, those are very large categories, but they are really the essence. I mean, that is when you have hit a point in your life. If you can't manage those needs, then the rest of it does not happen. Housing does not happen, and transportation doesn't happen. And there are certainly many government services and other larger nonprofits who can provide that. But sometimes it's just one person sitting with someone the person who understands the resources, trying to articulate and perhaps advocate and introduce that person into the system.
That's right. And we find that if you fall out of the system, it is very hard to get back in. Like if you lose your apartment, even if the parent or both parents are working, they might not have the money to put first and last down. So it's just, that's so rigid. It's like they don't have that. So they end up in their car with 4 children. I don't even, it boggles the mind to think that people could manage that. But it's a very slippery slope, losing anything, or, an emergency room visit or whatever it is.
Well, and I think of it as kind of a two-sided slippery slope or a very high hill. And when we think of people in need, it is definitely a slippery slope. When we think about people who have the true haves, the people who have privilege of education, of safety, of a sense of security day in and day out, of their relationships and where their life is going, and perhaps money. And there are certainly, we've never been in such a situation in this country where the haves have so much and the have-nots are so destitute. And so I think about this, and my genuine intent, even in talking with you about this, is to continue to get the word out to people who are very comfortable that you should never take that for granted any single day, because if tomorrow your number is up, you're not taking that money with you. And if you are able to generate good karma by hanging out and contributing in small ways to some of these needs that can be articulated either through the heart channels or other places, that karma will go with you. I'm confident that there is a score sheet being kept out there somewhere, and you have to care now more than ever.
I think there's always been need, to some degree. It is really, really pronounced now. And I mean, look, I'm a liberal. I remember people saying, oh, well, if we elect this person, they're just going to redistribute the wealth. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. because the rich people should be paying taxes because they can. And the people who are not getting along so well, they shouldn't have to pay taxes.
And in 1957, when your father turned the car around, the wealthiest people in the country were in fact paying 40% of their annual income was going to taxes. That was also at a time when the department store was owned by a family in town or in the big city nearest to your town, and they knew who their employees were, and they understood that they needed to pay their employees a wage because they all lived in the same town. So the inequity is, we can see it all, how it happened. And I don't think anybody's really satisfied with it.
People lose sight of the fact. It's like, oh, well, we've got to put a wall up. We can't. Every time I hear that, the vision of the Statue of Liberty pops into my mind. And I think we used to be, come on, join us. I don't know why we don't do that anymore. It's like we helped some Afghan families who had worked for our country, who got brought here because they had done a service for this country. There's a slippery slope too, because you don't speak the language. You got kids in tow. You think they're going to help you, and you get put in a tent where there's water coming in under the floor. I think if you live in gratitude and your heart is open to that, then you see with your heart, and your heart says, help these people. It's what needs to be. We're just one family. It's just, we're all under the same banner of heaven.
I just want to reiterate, because this is sort of going to lead into my next question. If you have privilege and you have comforts and you've got life experience, sometimes we lose sight of how valuable that is. I think women in particular, every woman hits 40 or 50 and all of a sudden you're invisible and you've got to fix your face and your hair and do all that because you're not right. You're not good enough. You're not enough. You're not all of this. Well, you know what? You are in fact more than plenty for what a family or an individual needs, which is part advocacy, part life experience. And part sometimes walking in, as you did, with a young person who otherwise would not be treated the same way in a biased system. It's only on this podcast and a few other places that I will say, being an older white woman walking into an emergency room, you get different service than if you are a family of color.
Yeah. And we got really good service. And she was down by where she goes to college. And she was like, what should I do? Where should I go? And I said, get right in an Uber and come to me, because we have a fantastic hospital just 5 minutes from here. And I wanted her there where I knew she'd get good care. And I knew if I was with her that she would get really good care.
Women listeners and people who identify as women, think about that. You have value above and beyond writing a check or sending a donation. And whether it's with the Heart Channels this year or next year or some other organization, there are those places that help connect people. It takes stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit because you don't know what might be asked of you. But imagine how life-changing that can be for that person who receives your gift.
It's remarkable. It's just, I hadn't done any in-person banking in a long time, but something came up and I had to do it. And I had to wait like a week to get in to see the president. You'd think it would have been Biden. Anyway, so because we were taking up some funds to help our crew out who had lost almost a year's wages because of the strike. So I was just trying to help some people, and they flagged it in my account. They said, oh, no, you can't give this money away. So I had to go over to the bank. The president is great. And his parents were originally Guatemalan, where our college student is from. And she's interested in business. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, why did I have to come in here to do this? I said, listen, I'm just trying to give some money away. I noticed that his name is unusual. And I say, oh, that's a beautiful name. Where are you from? And he tells me. And I said, actually, I have somebody in my life who's from that country. And she's just lovely. I said, actually, she's interested in business. I said, because he hadn't waited on a lot of celebrity kind of people. And he was interested in me, because, I'm odd. So I said, let me ask you something. I said, do you do internships or something? He said, what do you mean? And I said, well, for instance, you let college students come in and check it out what you do and everything, because I think I might know somebody who might be interested. And he said, well, we do have a program. He said, actually, we need people. He said, if you have a college degree, we'll train you. In fact, if you're in college, we'll help you out with the college. I was like, hallelujah.
Bingo.
Yes. So, I took his card and I said, I'm going to send somebody to you. But it's just, again, it's just so easy to help. But we're finding we've now swept someone into our little Heart Channels who I had been working with, and she retired. And I said, we need somebody to identify resources like that, or just finding out what people like, what they're interested in doing, and seeing if you can help them stitch together the foundations of having a life. There are many counties and cities who provide people with free training for computers and stuff. Invaluable. But many people need help in being brought along to that.
If you don't have a phone or you don't have Wi-Fi, you can't Google the question. That Correct. Sometimes is the baseline.
Yes.
Or you could go sit in the library with everybody else who doesn't have a phone or a computer. And there's the need right there. If you're a listener and you aren't quite sure what to do, go wander around the library at 1 p.m. and you will see people in need.
What a great idea. It's like I was telling somebody the other day about when COVID happened and the kids had to study at home. And most people thought, well, that's just great. The kids just get on their iPad and, they do their thing like that. It's like, and for many, iPads were given to children. But how many of those people had Wi-Fi at home so they could take advantage and the necessaries of coming along in school? And so poor mothers the walking poor, ended up walking with their several children down to McDonald's or something so that they could get on the Wi-Fi so that their children could get at least some of their learning done then. And most people, that doesn't even occur to.
I was leading into the fact that your website and the goal of the Heart Channels is you use the phrase, and those who wish to help. And so you talked a little bit about the plans to create a network of resource availability, or a network of people who then can sort of swap resource ideas. Is there anything more concrete that you can talk about that is sort of part of the plan or the vision?
Well, it has become obvious to us that what differentiates us, or what we came to identify as what differentiated us, was that we were willing to really get our hands into it and be personal with it. We're just 4 women and we all have super busy, big jobs in the world out there. So we need people who, we haven't built it into our website yet, but those, like I said, who wish to help. There are people out there who even have, maybe they have language skills. It's like, the Afghan person, the family that you're trying to support, I can help. I can be an interpreter. I could do an hour or 3 hours a week helping them with language, helping them fill out forms, endless forms. There's got to be a way to organize that so we can sustain the thoughtful, personal relationship that we hope to be able to have.
It is an incredible expression of humanity that is so needed right now at this time when in some ways people are more isolated than ever before. And yet they have so many tools sitting right on their desktop to connect with somebody, to learn more about a situation or a need, and then figure out how they can offer, or to say, here's what I can do. And because this technology exists, I can be in Minnesota, you can be in California, and somebody else in your group can be somewhere else. And
correct.
So we have these tools. Some of us have time. Some of us have access to other sorts of resources. And there's no reason in the world why we can't get behind some leaders who have compassion and say, we are Americans. We expect better of ourselves. And I am grateful that you are championing this and using your time.
Well, I'm hooked on it myself now, so I can't I can't stop.
If we can go back, Annie, to growing up and some of those values and those experiences, and to be honest, turning the car around is such a powerful metaphor. It's a metaphor that we as a country should be using right now. Hit the brakes and turn the car around and go back to where it is that we lost our humanity.
Right. It's like how many times these days do you walk down the street and there's somebody with a cup and a sign out, and then you have 20 feet or whatever to go, oh, am I going to reach in my bag and give them something? Or am I going to go in the grocery store and buy something nutritious and offer that to them? Sometimes I'm like, I'm busy. I have things to do. I can't today. I try to always make myself turn the car around and go back and drop something in the cup, because it all matters. So you got to turn the car around, and every little bit helps. Sometimes people just need somebody to just say, I'm thinking about you. I'm feeling for you, Yeah. To go back to your question, where did those impulses go? Because where I grew up, if someone's house burned down, immediately somebody, maybe it was a interfaith council or whatever, be like, so-and-so lost their home and they have 3 children and these are their ages and they need clothes. Somebody's going to help them and they're going to get a house and they need a kitchen table or whatever. In my memory, my community sprang to action on that. There weren't homeless people there. There was certainly poverty, but there was nobody who was sleeping on the street anywhere. And I don't know, when integrity in thought and action is barely considered anymore, even on the floor of the Senate, that is shocking. I can't even imagine, if children are watching the news, what they must think.
The other aspect, and I want, as listeners, Annie and I are going on and on about being available to the people in need. Advocacy for mental health. It's not a glamour cause. It's a lot of tragedy. And right now it's preventable tragedy, because we have people graduating from college and who are employed to help people, and we don't have them in the right places, and we don't have nearly enough of them, and they aren't being paid enough.
Yes. Somebody was telling me the other day what a teacher in Kentucky made. Kentucky is my home state. I think the salary was $18,000 a year.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
And they're expected to put something together to supply what the state won't in terms of books and crayons and pencils and all those supplies, glue, stuff like that, they're, the teachers are going on GoFundMe to get that stuff. But Michelle Obama gave some wonderful advice, and that's how I took myself to the public school here. People said, how can I help? What can I do? And she said, if you really want to help, she's just go down to your local elementary school or your junior high and go in and ask them what they need. It's so simple, and you'll get a list. And that's easy to do. You can go right over to Staples or whatever and get it, or get Amazon. We're so connected and so disconnected at the same time. But these are pretty simple things to find solutions for or help for just by being thoughtful and looking around, turning the car around. I'm going to stop by there. Just going to see if they're okay. Because our organizations are seeming to be falling apart at the edges and the heart at the same time. Everything's just kind of reorganizing themselves. Hopefully they'll reorganize themselves around higher principles again,
The institutions that we used to rely on have been in a state of paralysis or dysfunction now for 6 or 7 years, 10, 15 years. And then when you look at the nonprofit sector and the very agencies that then are trying to pick up and catch people before they fall through the cracks, those people are exhausted. The same group of people with positive energy who have been in the mix have been doing this now for a long time, I guess, which is another call to action. That if you've sort of been the check writer, but you have an education or you have experience to do things, this is the year, this is the time that you really need to step forward, get out of your comfort zone, get off of the couch, because our democracy is on the precipice, certainly. And everybody is at this heightened state of anxiety. And that is not a time then when people have the extra wherewithal to even manage their own situation. The stress levels are just so high. So that's where I think those of us who can need to reach in and do something different and do something that makes a connection, as you say.
Yes, connections, loving actions. There's, if you're feeling down, you're feeling blue, you're feeling afraid, just try doing one nice thing and your blood pressure will just go down.
It's true. Any other thoughts about the heart channels or what your goal is for it? It seems as though you're still sort of in an organizational state.
Right, because none of us who are working on this are lawyers. So we do have somebody who has a background in nonprofits who's very knowledgeable and is guiding us. But there's always that, we just have to fill out this form. This form is 123 pages long. It's like, oh my God. But what we're hoping to do is create some interest that puts some eyeballs on our website and what we're doing, because my wonderful show that I've spent 7 years doing is entering its last season. So the abundance of financial support that has given is about to dry up. So we need to go outside our own group and get funding. And when you're 501, you have to get a certain amount. But it's, there is such enormous need in every direction. And I think sometimes it is easier for people just to go, I'll just give to United Way. Great. I mean, just giving is giving. Love is never wasted. So yes, we're trying to drum up a little interest in our personal work that we're doing to help people not fall down the rabbit hole.
Right. So where the Heart Channels is right now, they are having to navigate the creation of a 501c3. Within the world of nonprofits, what that means is that then they have achieved the level of accountability and performance with regard to the organization that then your contribution to them is tax deductible.
What happens is when you go in and you push the donate button, you can get a tax deduction, but it goes to our little fiscal partner who has a little umbrella that they brought us into. And they're called Charity on Top. It's a lovely organization that started much like ours, friends going, we need to help. So you can get a tax deduction if you do that. You just donate through a charity on top and tag it to go to the Heart Channels. They then put the money over with us.
More good people to have in the network. And for anybody out there in your own community trying to think of how to do this and how to begin building this sort of network, perhaps a little bit more regionally, the resources are there, the people are there. And I'm confident that if you were to reach out to any of these sorts of entities, someone's going to help answer your questions to perhaps have you become the leader in your own circle to make a difference in the lives of others. The needs that you maybe don't even understand. But once you say, I'm willing to help, wow, people's ears perk up.
Yeah, they do.
We are looking then at the fact that to donate, as Annie was just explaining, in a tax-deductible fashion to the Heart Channels, go to theheartchannels.org, and you can learn more about the programs that they have going on, the people who are working with Annie on this project, and follow them, but also donate because it's the right thing to do. We're heading into the holiday season, and everybody has their hand out. It was just Give to the Max Day in Minnesota. And the headlines today were that, this was just earlier this week, that it's the big rally where all the charities try to make sure that they get in before the end of the year for people who need the tax write-off. The amount raised was higher than pre-COVID, the last pre-COVID level. So
wow,
the generosity is big in Minnesota, and we're fortunate in that respect. But that is not to say that we don't have need. So we need more hope. And that's why Annie and I have been talking today. Again, theheartchannels.org. And I will say this to you listeners, because going back to 2015, I have been talking about the importance of TV women in our lives and the role models that they have presented to us. I'm watching Annie right now on Zoom. I'm probably going to make her cry. But, you know, the strongest moments that I've ever had in my life usually is when I'm sitting at my desk and I'm presented with a challenge back in previous work experiences. And it's sort of like, I need courage. I need to stand up straight and I need to be strong and I need to be. And then I just think about any number of my favorite TV characters, the women who I could study time and time again by rewinding, watching it again. And that has given me so much. And I think, listeners, it does for you too, because you're a TV follower. And you certainly, if you've been following TV, you've been following Annie's career over the years, over these many decades. And the characters she plays are no shrinking violet. There's not a shrinking violet in the crowd. But my point being this, that we need to get behind the people who are willing to get out there and say that there is need and to say the things that are hard and difficult to say because somebody like Annie Potts is willing to do it. And so for all the things that Annie has ever presented to you and the opportunity and the laughs and the nodding moments and just the heartfelt, I have Designing Women episodes just sort of rolling through my head right now. And that is the impact that has grown in 2 generations, at least, of women to be more powerful, to be more vocal, and to advocate for others. And so who better to lead us in this than Annie Potts?
Well, thank you. Now you have made me cry. And thank you. It's, of course, been my privilege. And all the collateral benefits of having a TV voice is to have a voice in the real world, especially when it is a positive one. You know, we all have that opportunity to act on our higher understanding of how it needs to be. And that's how we get out of the pickle we're in.
Mm-hmm. It is a level of authenticity that you bring to this and heart that makes it so easy for me to ask my listeners to do this, to donate whatever you can, to make the connection, to get onto the newsletter. The good things are going to continue to come. And it's the least we can do as part of this big TV community to stay with you in this next chapter of your life. And if we can do it yet this year in 2023, for Thanksgiving, for the older women in your life who watched TV with you, do it in their name. You don't have to take them to lunch anymore. You don't have to buy them a holiday present anymore. Just send that money off and Annie and her team can put it to good use and perhaps they'll bring you in some way as well.
You know what you can also do? I'm on this app called Cameo. I do personal birthday greetings, whatever you can think of. And the money that goes to that goes directly into the Hearts channel. So you get a little something for you, and the money goes right into the heart channels.
That is the gift for the person who has everything, right? We will include the link to Annie's Cameo account. So one more way to make the connection to then get yourself a little closer to the heart channels. Any closing thoughts for us, Annie?
No, just many, many thanks to you for having me on the show and being able to talk about this. It means so much to me, and especially at this time of year. It is the giving time of year. So come on and give. Feels good.
Get more information on Advanced TV Herstory, including an opportunity to sign up for our newsletter, at tvherstory.com. For more information on the Heart Channels, go to theheartchannels.org. You'll also be able to find a link in our show notes to Annie's Cameo account and how to sign up to give a special gift to someone in your life. Many thanks to Mary Lou Morose, who could honestly tune a piano with one ear tied behind her back. Great audio work in this episode. And to Jazzer, the artist behind the song Take Me Higher, found at freemusicarchive.com. Lastly, listeners, I will say this. I can relate totally to the powerful picture of Annie's dad turning the car around, because I too like to learn more. And that's why I podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.